My name is Mariko Tippett, and I'm a member of the steering committee for the Vail Parent Network. The Vail Parent Network is a group of parents who have united to advocate for your child's education. We are currently working to educate the residents of Vail about the upcoming primary election and how important it is that everyone take the time to 1, register to vote, 2, educate yourselves about the candidates that we have here, and 3, vote your conscience. To help you with this important goal, we have invited these candidates here today so you can decide who will best represent you. Each of you are handed a Vail Votes Pledge form as you walked in. We ask that each of you, as you can see here, we ask that each of you take the pledge to vote in this month's primary election, which will be held August 30th. So August 30th for the primary election. And also for the general election that will be held on November 8th. So that's November 8th for the general election. The state representatives that will be elected will be our voice at the Capitol. A voice that we want to ensure will be partners with our parents in securing improved funding for our schools and to stop the hemorrhaging of teachers leaving the state of Arizona. Again, I want to thank you for coming, and I want to thank the candidates for your participation tonight. Before we begin, if you wouldn't mind, if we could stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now I'll hand over the time to our moderator tonight, Ms. Allison Pratt.
Thank you. As Rico said, my name is Allison Pratt. I have the pleasure of serving on the school board here in Vail, and I am grateful for the opportunity tonight to be your moderator. So just to give you guys a brief overview of how tonight is going to look, we're going to start with introductions from our candidates, including what they would like us to know about themselves and why they would be a good legislator. We're going to limit those to 3 minutes each. We'll then go to questions submitted ahead of time to the moderator from the public and also from a government class at Empire High School. Answers will be kept to 90 seconds at that point. We then will go to questions from the audience. We'll have 2 questions that will be given generally to our candidates. Those will also be 90 seconds, and then we'll have hopefully time for more direct questions to specific candidates, and those will be 60 seconds apiece. We'll then end our evening with a 2-minute closing statement by each candidate. And just a couple little things to note. We're trying to keep things moving as fast as possible tonight so we could get as much information to our audience tonight. So we'd like to ask you guys to hold your applause until the very end. Also, if you have a question for our panel in general or for a specific candidate, if you could just hold the card up that you were given, write your question on that, hold it up, and there'll be people in here that can grab it for you. All right. So with that, we're going to start with our candidates' introductions. I'm going to give the order. We're going to start first with Gail Griffin, then Jaime Alvarez, then Drew John, Dennis Barger, Mike Holmes, and Jason Lindstrom.
Thank you, and thank you for having this forum. My name is Gail Griffin. I'm your state senator for District 14. District 14 includes all of Cochise County, all of Greenlee County, most of Graham County, and the eastern portion of Pima County. I've been a resident in Cochise County in Arizona for 48 years. I came in from Ethiopia. My husband was in the military and we were stationed over in Ethiopia for 2 years. I'm a real estate broker and have been with the same firm for over 40 years. At the legislature, I am in a leadership position. I'm the Republican whip at the Senate, and I chair the Water and Energy Committee. I also chair the Joint Border Security Committee, the Joint Private Lands Committee, and there is a map out front that shows you how much private property Arizona has. Arizona only has 13% of land that is in private hands. Take a look at that map on your way out. I am also on the Water Banking Commission, the Water Protection Fund, and the Joint Budget Committee, and several others. Things that we addressed is a balanced budget. We actually had a structurally balanced budget this year, and what that means is that we didn't spend any more money than what came in. The solution to a lot of the problems and funding on different issues, of course, is jobs and the economy. With a strong economy, additional revenues come in, and we can use those revenues to take and apply towards those issues. I live real close to the border, so securing the border is real important to me. I have had as many as 50 illegals going through my property, every one of them with a 50-pound bundle of pot on their back. The spotter in the front has an AK-47, and a spotter in the back has an AK-47, and that's a heck of a way to have to live. I support immigration. I don't support illegal immigration. I believe in upholding our Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I believe in working to improve academic achievement and getting more money into the classroom for the students and teachers. I believe in protection of property rights and affordable health care. And I believe that's my 3 minutes. So thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Jaime Alvarez. I am not a politician. This is the first time I've ever entered any kind of political race. I did it because I retired 4 years ago, and within a few months after retiring, I went down and I did something kind of crazy. I paid $65 so that I could be a volunteer in the schools. And when I was volunteering in the schools, I was a 7th and 8th grade math tutor. I also helped with various sports programs. And as I saw what was going on, I shook my head in disbelief. My children did not go to school here in Arizona, but I've got 7 grandchildren here in this state. And what has been going on with our school systems, our public education system, is terrible. And I think that our state legislators have failed us. When you don't invest in our future, our children, our grandchildren, that is a tremendous degradation of our state and our country. And I think that something has to be done. Now, I've traveled throughout our district, very big district. I was a one-issue candidate, if you can believe that. But as I started traveling, 3 other areas came up. Economic development, water, healthcare, those issues. There have been some other side issues that to me are very, very important, but I don't even want to try and pick those up at this point, because those 4 issues are pretty big and very major. Unless we start making changes and have a cultural change in the State House and a change in your representatives, whether it be in the House or the Senate, we will continue, and we will, as a state, fail. That's why I'm running. And when you look at what they say about me, you will see education. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
I think I'm up next, Drew.
Oh, you're trying to take this limelight from me, Drew. Gosh darn it.
Am I up next? It is me. Dennis, pay attention.
Right? They're in the same party.
Can I have my seconds back, please?
So just to, I'll just read it one more time. Gail Griffin, Jaime Alvarez, Drew John, Dennis Barger, Mike Holmes, then Jason. I-
Plan to take it back.
Yeah, I got you, Dennis. That was a good one. Savor the moment. Anyway, it's great to see everybody here. I can't really see you very well. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm excited to be over in Vail. This is such a neat area. I was concerned when I looked at the district because Vail was in it, and I thought, well, that's Tucson, you know. And then I came over and started meeting some people over here because when I was a kid and traveled here, Pantano Stables was all that was there back then. And saw the growth. I was amazed by it. I started visiting the people, and I saw that these are rural people hanging on by their fingertips to the rural lifestyle of community involvement. And I got really excited about Vail being in the district and thankful that it is. My name is Drew John, by the way. I'm one of the candidates for the Arizona House of Representatives. I'm the 4th generation in LD 14. I was raised in Cochise County, and I live in Graham County now, in Safford, Arizona. I spent 20 years of my life in Cochise County, and the rest of it, we won't talk about how many of those were, but that was in Graham County. I'm a business person in Graham County. I've had businesses throughout Graham County since '76, actually. Family businesses, partnerships, with my wife, quite a few with my wife, actually. Had 2 businesses in Cochise County. I've been involved in the Gila Valley, Graham County area, Safford, Thatcher, Pima area for over 30 years in volunteer organizations. As a business person, to be successful in business, you got to know your people, and so you've got to be involved with them and know what you can do to help improve your community, and that's what I did. I served on the Safford Unified School Board. Very big learning experience for me. I was asked to run because the one that I was running against wasn't listening to the parents. And so I ran, I got elected by the parents of the community. And it was great to be part of that. I'm still in my 16th year as a county supervisor. I'm actually retiring from a supervisor in December. You know, I lived in this district all my life, and I've struggled with everybody else. And I've had businesses that have failed during the recession. I had 2 that failed actually right at the recession. You know, it's sad that the Arizona economy was #1 in the United States, and then we got hit the hardest economy-wise. I'm honored to have the opportunity to represent everybody. My 3 things that's important to me is economy and jobs, education, and transportation infrastructure. Education and economy and jobs are tied together at the hip. You can't have really one without the other. And we have to work on those things, and to do that, we've got to develop better revenue streams that we need to do, supply what we need to supply for our schools. Thank you. Dennis?
First of all, I'd like to thank the Vail Parent Network for hosting this event. A lot of us on the stage have been traveling all over southeastern Arizona over the last few months having events like this. And this is finally a home field event for me, so I'm excited about having it here in Vail. We've traveled. We had an event up in Safford in Drew's neighborhood. Our clean election debates was 2 weeks ago in Benson. Multiple events in Sierra Vista, Bisbee on Sunday night. So we've been going to a lot of places, and so it's really nice when we show up and there's a crowd that's bigger than the people on the stage. So thank you for being here tonight. My name is Dennis Barger, and I am running for the State House. There are 2 open seats in this year's election. Both current members of our State House are term limited out, so 2 new members will be elected. I have lived in southeastern Arizona, or southern Arizona, for 38 years, most of it in southeastern Arizona. We did spend 4 years in Yuma when I started my teaching career. I was a high school government history and law teacher for 8 years before I transitioned into administration. This is my 20th school year here in the Vail School District and my 11th as principal. And so I've had an opportunity to serve the Vail community and also beyond that into the area of Tucson. I have served the last few years on the Tucson Metropolitan Education Commission, and I serve on the board for my church trustees for our foundation. So I do serve beyond just the Vail School District. I'm running primarily because education matters. Approximately 42% of our state budget is spent on K-12 education, and I don't think that our legislature necessarily understands the decisions they make and what that impact has on families as the decision trickles down to parents and children. And so when 40+% of your budget of a $9 billion plus budget is education, we need some people who are in that field to represent that and make some informed decisions. So that's one of the reasons why that I've chosen to run for this position. I've been asked many times, what does that mean for you as a principal if you are elected? Fortunately, I've got a really, really good staff, and things could continue to roll forward and would give opportunities for leadership for some new people, and I would take an unpaid leave of absence during the legislative session so that I would not be leaving my school altogether. Phoenix is not that far away, and we have cell phones, so in the event of an emergency, I am reachable. And so I want to make sure people understand that there is a plan in place there. I am really treating this process as a job interview. You're always interviewing for your next job. We say that all the time. And past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. I've served my community well. I've raised my children here, and I want to serve a bigger area. So if you are a voter, I would appreciate you considering me as one of your candidates. Thank you.
Okay. Well, my name is Mike Holmes, and I'm your neighbor. I moved here 10 years ago, right at the intersection of 83 and Soarita Road. And I moved here because the Army brought me here. Actually, I found an assignment. I had fallen in love with Southeast Arizona, floating through various times through Fort Huachuca. Love the Sky Islands, love the mountains, love the fact that it's near the border. I grew up on the border in Southeast Texas. And I just thought the environment was great. So I finally found an assignment that would bring me here. So 10 years ago I arrived and thought I was going to live down somewhere around Sierra Vista, and my wife looked at the schools and she said, we're living in Vail, and I said, that's an hour away, and she said, I don't care, that's where we're living. Because it was all about the schools. My 3 kids graduated from Cienega High School right down the street. They all went to the University of Arizona on Wildcat scholarships. That's been fantastic. They were all able to live at home and go to school, not for free, but at reduced cost, and that was really helpful. I retired from the Army and went to work in Tucson. Did a couple of private enterprise type things, and then got hired by Pima County to be the landlord for all of the fun things in Pima County, like Colossal Cave. I was largely responsible for the turnaround there in the past couple of years. Fairgrounds and all the racetracks around it, Pima Air and Space Museum, Old Tucson, Sonora Desert Museum, and then a couple of other things like golf courses and places in between. I love this place, I really do. And when I came back from Afghanistan in 2010 and saw what the legislature had done to cut programs that I thought we needed to have in order to pull out of this recession, I got really angry. And I was standing in the DMV getting a motorcycle license, because that's what middle-aged men do when they come back from deployments. And the lady asked me if I wanted to register to vote, and I said, well, I'm thinking to myself, I registered already. And then I thought, yeah, I do, actually. And I registered as an independent because I was angry. And when you take off those blinders of party, you start seeing things from a different perspective. And you can see the faults in both and the promises in both. And I began writing about it, saying things in public about it, and doing things about it. And about a year and a half ago, a friend of mine from Afghanistan, who was the vice chair of the Democratic Party in Cochise County, said he'd like me to run. And I thought about it, and I did. So here I am as a Democrat, once a Republican, and I'm running for your vote because I want to solve problems. I don't want to talk about party issues. I don't want to talk about party platforms. I want to talk about pragmatic solutions to fix what has been done here in the past decades and to right the wrongs. To get our roads squared away and our schools squared away. My name is Mike Holmes, and I'd appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Check. My name is Jason Lindstrom. I work during the day as a criminal prosecutor. I came straight here after work today. At the Cochise County Attorney's Office, one of my tasks is to coordinate the Felony Adult Diversion Program. In the evenings, I teach at the U of A. I alternate between teaching professional ethics and judicial process. I like to think that I mingle with a lot of smart, intelligent, motivated people. I have a great respect for the thoughts that are given to me from members of my family, members of the legal community, and other people that I might share a glass of wine with some evening. And the reason I'm sitting here is because the conversations that I've had over the past few years of my life have brought me to a place where the people all around me feel like something is going wrong. Something is not happening the way it's supposed to happen. But each of these conversations seem to end the same way. They end with us leaving frustrated, feeling like there's nothing we can do about it. Very intelligent people will leave the conversation saying, well, I'm not even going to vote. It doesn't matter anyway. What difference does it make? Well, that's had a profound impact on me because I was one of those people. And not long ago, leaving one of those conversations, it occurred to me that I can no longer be one of those people. I have to step up and do something. Something has to be done because we cannot continue to go down the same road we've been going down for who knows how long here in Arizona. We know what the effects of that road are because our education is bottom in the nation. Okay, we see the effects. We feel the vice grip, as it kind of closes up around us and makes us feel helpless. Well, ultimately, that's why I'm here. I want to press the brakes. I want to reach out to the rational, silent majority, the people that understand that, wait a minute, this isn't right. We can do it better. What's going wrong? Where are all these resources going? If we pay 50 cents of every one of our dollars to education, that's true. Where is that money going? And why is our education so poor? I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm here to offer myself as your representative. What I would like to do is carry the good ideas from the working class people, the ordinary people like me, like my family, like the people that I know, to bring those good ideas into government and make sure that whatever we do up there is transparent and that business as usual grinds to a halt and we start doing something better tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for those introductions. We will now move to questions that have been submitted ahead of time for our candidates. We're going to limit those answers to 90 seconds. So question number 1, our current legislators continue to try and cut funding to our district-sponsored charter schools in the state, which include 2 of the originals here in Vail, Vail Academy and High School and Savano. What will you do to fight to keep that funding in place if you are elected? And the order on this one, okay, write this down, right? Jaime Alvarez, Drew John, Dennis Barger, Mike Holmes, Jason Lindstrom, and Gail Griffin.
Okay. One of the things that gets to me is how some of the funding has been going on. When you start looking at all the different tax credits, and private schools, according to a Department of Revenue report just last year in 2015, it showed that $125 million of tax credits were going for private schools. Now, if you start looking at the funding for public education school systems that include charter schools, you'll see 42% of the budget is supposed to be for public education. That's over $50 million right there. Why is that being diverted? I think that we can also turn around and look at those tax credits and question, why don't we put a limit? Because if we don't put a limit on those private education tax credits, it's going to continue to grow for 18% of the students. Because out of the over 1 million students here in Arizona, only 18% actually go to private schools. So that's one of the ways that I would do it, is to start looking for areas that we can get some revenue streams, and it will help our public education system. I keep emphasizing public. Thank you.
Well, you know, when I was on the school board way back when, that was when charter schools came about. And it scared us to death because they had a whole different set of rules at the time. And we were thinking, wait a minute, this is just going to destroy public education. I myself, in fact, I had brown hair when I got on school board. This is the color of it when I got off the school board in 4 years. But as a business person, you look at the charter schools within the district, it's probably one of the most efficient ways to have a charter school because you're utilizing the services that are there. So I like the setup just looking at it. I don't know a lot about the setup that's there right now, but just from a business person's mind, that seems to be more efficient than having the separate charter schools. I do believe parents should know where their kids are being taught and should have some type of a choice. My big concern here in the metro areas, there's a lot of choices. But in the rural areas out in southern Arizona and southeastern Arizona, there's not many choices for charter schools or private schools. And you know, my concern is that we have to be really, really careful when we talk about the funding private schools and funding some of these others, because it could come back and bite us later on down the road. But I think the charter schools within the school district is probably one of the best programs that they have as far as charter schools go. That's my opinion on it.
I'm waiting for Andre to clock there. Oh, I'm sorry. Carry on, Hank. You're all right.
Hey, don't worry about it. Dennis don't even try to do it.
I did.
Well, actually, this is where I've spent 15 of the last 20 years of my life working in a public district-sponsored charter school. So one of the big misnomers is that charter schools are not public schools. They are public schools in Arizona. Some of them are privately operated public schools where there's not as much accountability to the community. There's not necessarily an elected school board where you as parents have some say as to who makes the decisions and operates those schools. So here in Vail, of course, we have some high school students out here tonight, and they are the benefactors of a system where we provide choice to families. We don't have the one-size-fits-all model here in Vail. And charter schools kind of do that across the state. So I'm a fan of charter schools. What I'm not a fan of is using the data points on those to compare them, because they're apples, oranges, bananas, grapes, and watermelons. They're not even close to each other. Some skim off the top and take the most elite students from metropolitan areas, and they get ranked as the best schools in the country. Well, do you go figure? How hard is that? Others take kids that have been kicked out of schools, that are struggled, that are trying to figure out life, and so they get labeled as, you know, ineffective or bad labels, and so it's really hard to compare them. I do know that the legislature has taken $1.3 million from this community by not allowing us to have charter schools. My school has been a charter school for 20 years. It's a K-12 school. It is unique. It meets every criteria that charter schools are supposed to, but we're being penalized because the Vail School District sponsors us, and that's wrong.
Our current legislators continue to try and cut funding for our district-sponsored charter schools in the state, which include two of the originals here in Vail, Vail Academy and High School in Savannah. What will you do to fight to keep that funding in place if you are elected?
Thank you.
Hold on.
Sorry. We're having all kinds of technical difficulties up here tonight. All right, so I'm going to brag a little bit, but there's a point to this. I've got a master's degree in international relations. I've got 2 graduate certificates. I clearly get school, and I clearly can do that. But I technically failed the 7th grade and was socially promoted. And that's because the school systems in Florida, and a long time ago, weren't able to teach to me, weren't able to meet my needs. So I like the idea of charter schools. I think district-owned charter schools are great. I think there are many very good not-for-profit charter schools out there as well. But I think that for-profit charter schools are an abomination. And I say that because if you're going to take my tax dollars and use it to teach kids and have money left over, that money needs to go back into teaching those kids better and providing more things for those kids and not going off to some private investors. So the idea that the state would cut funding to district-owned charter schools, the most valuable of those charter schools, is terrible to me. What will I do to defend it? I'm going to fight like you would not believe to make sure that Dennis's school and Savannah and all those other district-owned charter schools are not only kept funding, but also that we encourage and grow that process as well. And that we did pay for it by taking the money away from those for-profit charter schools. That's my thought. I got 34 seconds, don't I? No, I don't.
The timer only has 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, then there I stand.
I think all of us would agree that education is a public interest. And we acknowledge that by sending a large portion of our tax dollars to fund education. Now, the question that's been posed actually to me, 2 things popped out. And let me just also say that some of these issues are new to me. My expertise is in a different area, but I will take it upon myself to learn as much as I can about these issues. But on the one hand, I believe that we should do everything within our power to enable more choice. We should have choices. We shouldn't stifle choice. But on the other hand, when I send my money to the state, I don't want that money to be funneled out to any private interests. I feel the same way about private prisons, by the way. But these public interests need to be kept public. And what I will do is everything within my power to make sure that public money stays public and that we use that public money to try to create as much choice as we can. These public funds, we own these funds. They're ours. It's our money that we pay in. And I don't want some gridlocked system that's established and working for the benefits of some special interest or corporation to take our money and funnel it out to their cronies, okay? That's something that I will fight against, and I think that's happening.
Okay, thank you. On your way out, if you haven't already picked up a yellow sheet out on the table out in the lobby, please pick one up. There's a breakout for different funding for education. And district charter schools existed from 1996 to 2016. There were fewer than 2,400 students attending district charter schools in 2014. In 2015, however, that number increased to approximately 39,000. So we went from 2,400 to 39,000 students that were in district charter schools, sponsored charter schools. They receive approximately $1,000 more per student than non-chartered schools. The Joint Legislative Budget Committee estimated that it would cost an additional $30 million to fund those additional 39,000 students. So right now the choice is traditional public schools or traditional charter school choice. Thanks to your vote and working on Prop 123 monies, there are $298 million of new monies that will go into education. But there are yellow sheets out that gives you additional information out on the table.
Thank you. Okay, on to question number 2. The School Facilities Board is supposed to provide land as well as funds to build new schools, but this has not happened over the last 4 to 5 years. How will you ensure that the school districts like Vail that have families flocking to the area will be provided with much needed lands and funds to prevent the overcrowding that we are experiencing? Okay, I'm going to write this down too, okay? So we're going to go Drew John, Dennis Barger, Mike Holmes, Jason Lindstrom, Gail Griffin, and Jaime Alvarez.
Ready? Okay. Well, I want to touch back on public schools real quick. We have created a marketing system that markets charter schools and doesn't promote public schools. I'm a public school fan because I was raised in a public school. But I think we need to spend more time on our public schools, like teachers' pay, better facilities, and promote the public schools as being the greener grass without taking the choice away from everybody. So I just want to say that more money needs to be spent on all of them. We can't print money. It's not something that only Washington can. We're not able to do that. So we've got to increase our revenue streams and to make them more efficient. That doesn't mean raising taxes. It doesn't mean creating a new tax. What it means is developing a better formula that's more efficient, such as your highway user revenue funds, the gas tax. That needs to be increased to the base. It was developed back when there was cars getting 10 miles per gallon, but yet we still use the same old system. It's the same with our school financing. It needs to be reformed. All of it needs to be reformed. It needs to be looked at, it needs to be talked about, and not talked about in their offices over there in Phoenix. People like Calvin needs to be there. Principals, people like Tom Powers from Morenci, the school superintendent up there. Teachers need to be involved. They need to work together to try to get this all worked out. But you got to have the revenue before you can answer a lot of the questions. Thank you.
I'll use a couple seconds to answer the last question because I got on my soapbox and never actually provided an answer. What I would do is I would go back to the numbers that Gail just provided. There were 2,400 students in district-sponsored charter schools. We obviously know which schools were charters before people started to take advantage of the charter laws. Why not go back to those schools that were already charter schools and create a rubric that says, what are you doing differently than your other district schools? There are no other K-12 schools in Vail. We're unique. We shouldn't have that taken away. Savannah's got some very unique things in their community schools. Those should not be taken away. So I would go back, identify those schools, create a rubric, and say which schools get to retain their status as charter schools. As for the SFB, funding new schools is something that was mandated by a court decision years back. Kind of like we just went through with the recent decision on Proposition 123, where the court said the legislature didn't comply with Proposition 301. We need to make sure that when the court orders and mandates things happen, that they happen. We don't need to give millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars in corporate tax cuts. At the end of a fiscal year, when there's money in the bank, we should be making sure that we're doing what is required by law. And Arizona continues to grow. We have a very young population in the state. New schools are needed. We don't need to give money back to companies when we can use the same dollars to build the schools that the laws already require. So that's what I would do, and actually follow the law.
All right, in my former life, if you ignored facts, people died. Straight up. So let's start off with a fact. The state legislature has been controlled by one party for the past 51 years. That's longer than I've been alive. Now, it really wouldn't matter what party that is. You can make up a party, call it the XYZ party. 50 years of unfettered control has led to a lot of corruption. It's led to an awful lot of rules being changed or ignored. Rules like how you fund schools, how you build schools, how you take care of county tax dollars that come up to you and should be returned back to the county. If we keep electing the same party back into office year after year after year, we're going to keep getting the same results. It hasn't changed. It's not going to change. You need to throw a little change up in there. You need to come in from a different perspective and a different point of view. And if you want to change the way that this legislature treats its own laws or ignores its own laws, like new school funding or school funding in general, then you need to put different people up there. It really is that simple. Take off the blinders and think about that for a moment. Let's stop voting with our hearts and start voting with our heads.
Well, as I've already told you, I've never worked in the state legislature before. I've never worked at the state capitol or federal capitol. I don't know what happens behind those closed doors. What I do know is Arizona is not Calcutta, okay? We are not so impoverished. We cannot fund the basic things that we think are important. I don't know where all the money goes, okay? I have not followed all the strings to find out who gets it at the end of the day. But I have a hunch. that we are not using the dollars that we currently raise for things like education in the most effective way that we could. Maybe we need to raise taxes. That's a real possibility. I think teachers need to be paid fairly. I think they're the cornerstone of good education. I also think education is so important that it's worth the investment and it's worth sacrificing something else to have good education. It's not just on the hip of things like economic prosperity, like Mr. John was saying. It's on the hip of almost everything, even a lot of our social problems. I think that, as Mr. Holmes said, it's time that we just press the brakes for a minute and say, wait, before we change anything, what are we doing now? I mean, before we, I need to know what's going on in there. Where's our money going? I think we all need to know this. And it's time that we send someone up there who's going to ask those questions fearlessly. Someone who's not looking for a future career in politics, someone who will ask the right questions. Thank you.
Again, pick up the yellow sheet. On the second page of the yellow sheet, the school facility boards this past legislative session got $317,167,800. Those monies went for building renewal grants, school facilities, new school facilities, and access to our best schools. Access to our best schools is funding to 8 schools and receiving enhanced credit ratings. So there were over $317 million that went to the school facility board this past session.
As you sit here and you listen to everybody, Democrat, Republican, with save one, they recognize that what the State House has been doing is wrong. And whether you give $317 million into this one account really doesn't mean a thing. Because when the districts are having to go out and get budget overrides, bonds, to address the issues that the state legislators and the State House have, done. I mean, when you start looking at this and say, what is going on? Something needs to change. And if you keep the same people in there and they think that the $317 million is sufficient, that should tell you right there. I don't think that they are in touch with what is going on with our school systems. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Julie Matthews' class at Empire High School. As a student who expects to graduate within a year and go to college, I am extremely concerned over school funding and education reform in the state of Arizona. Although there have been propositions made to improve our education system as a whole, low teacher salaries and lacking investments in schools is still an impending problem. How do you plan to fix problems like these in the future, and how will they be different from past attempts? We're going to start with Dennis Barger. We'll go to Mike Holmes, Jason Lindstrom, Gail Griffin, Jaime Alvarez, and Drew John.
Well, I think this is the biggest question facing Arizona. We currently rank 50th in state funding, not overall funding, but funding that comes from the state. There's additional monies that go into public education, as has been mentioned, local tax dollars, federal dollars, overrides. So there's a variety of other ways the money comes into school districts. And so how do we as a state move out of the bottom with significant willpower? It is not going to be easy. It's going to take a collective effort of people to say, you know what, this is no longer good enough. I moved to Arizona in the 1970s, and I was in elementary school, and Arizona was around the middle of the pack in funding public education. And we have moved down and down and down. And over the last 8 years, we lead the country in education funding cuts. So the entire nation was facing a recession, and we continued to cut education, and we have continued to give corporate tax cuts each year recently and not put that money back into education. So we need to bring both parties to the table. We need to have a serious conversation about what we are willing to do. We have to look at the fact that we can't attract quality applicants for a lot of jobs, that we're losing our college graduates to outside the state because they can get paid better somewhere else doing the same job, and all that stems from education. The sooner we fix education, the sooner we fix Arizona and the poverty issues that come our way.
So back in the 90s, I think it was about 1994, voters passed a constitutional amendment called Proposition 108, which makes it really difficult, if not functionally impossible, to raise taxes in this state. So raising taxes for education is going to be incredibly difficult, and really and truly is not going to happen. So what do? Well, two things. One, we at the legislature have to make education a priority. I'll tell you as an economic developer, because that's what I do with Pima County. Companies moving to a state are looking for a trained and ready workforce, and you don't do that when your schools are ranked 4th from the bottom. So we need to prioritize education. We get that. But how do you pay for it? Economic development. We need to invest in the roads, invest in the schools, invest in the things that businesses need in order for them to bring their business here. We've had some successes here in Tucson recently with Caterpillar. All right? We need more of that. And we got that success because we gave them the things that they needed in order to succeed. Right now, there's an initiative in Douglas to make that port of entry there look like the one in Nogales, a heavy industry port of entry at Douglas. Beef up the highway line that goes from Douglas all the way up through Wilcox to Safford. Allow for state lands to sell enough lands for a rail line. And that's how you create jobs. And you don't need to use public money to do that. You just need to give them the structure and let them succeed on their own.
Each of us, when we go home, we have a household to maintain, to run. We have our own budget at home. And in that budget, there are priorities, things that we must pay for first. And in order sometimes to pay for those important things, we have to cut out other things that aren't so important. Maybe some entertainment or some fun. Whatever it is, we all know what our priorities are. The government works the same way. As a collective, as a community, we have certain things that we consider to be priorities. One of those things that I believe we've decided over the last 100 years to be a priority is education. If we need more money for education, then I would propose that it has to come from somewhere else. Education should be a #1 priority for the state of Arizona. We cannot sit at the bottom of the heap any longer. We have to be rational. We have to operate in a way where we understand that most of the other issues that we face are directly linked to it, and it's worth the investment. And that's, I think, a paradigm shift that maybe we need to introduce. When you put a dollar into education, we are actually investing in something greater, whether it be some job later on. It's going to pay us back in the long run. Thank you.
Education is a top priority. I think everyone on this panel agrees to that. Again, out on the table, there is a pie chart as to where our money comes from that the legislature has control on and where it goes. 2 governors ago, the spending and the deficit spending was $3 billion in the hole. And so part of the problem is that other states, you need to compare apples to apples. Other states have more private property than Arizona does. Arizona, as I mentioned earlier, only has 13% of land. The other states have more private property, they have more industry, they have more manufacturing, and more revenues that come in. Washington, D.C. gets more money per student than any other area. They come in dead last academically. So where is our money going and where does it need to go? in my opinion, and I think everybody's opinion, is that needs to get in the classroom for the students and the teachers so that we can, our top goal would be for high academic achievement. And this school district is one of the best, if not the best in the state. And so trying to get the money where it needs to go, again, pick up the pie chart and see where we need to take it from in order to put it towards education, more education. But there's over $4.5 billion going to education now, and that's K through 12. So I think my stop sign is there.
Would you please repeat the question?
As a student who expects to graduate within a year and go to college, I am extremely concerned over school funding and education reform in the state of Arizona. Although there have been propositions made to improve our educational system as a whole, low teacher salaries and lacking investments in schools is still an impending problem. How do you plan to fix problems like these in the future, and how will they be different from past attempts?
We actually need to have some dedicated revenue streams, and we have to assess it periodically. If you don't start doing that, we will never get to where we want to be. And when I've talked to many constituents, the questions that they ask me is, whatever happened to the money that was supposed to come from the lottery? Whatever happened to the half-cent that was supposed to go to education? All of these different questions constituents are asking. And the reason that they're asking is because, you know, a lot of them actually think that the Proposition 123 has already taken care of the issues of education. And I tell them, no. They cut over $1 billion that is not part of that 123. And we've got to address all of that. Now, just about everybody up here has talked about economic development, okay? And you start talking about healthcare. So when you start looking at a three-legged stool that has those items, the economy, healthcare, and the education has to be the foundation for all of that. It's got to be. If you don't have that foundation, no stool is going to stand up. It's going to fail. And so we've got to do better than what we're doing.
You know, I was raised on the farm and a ranch, and you had to learn common sense quite a bit, or you had to do the job over till you got it right. And so if you want to solve problems that happens on the ground, then you need to have the people that's on the ground, the experts on the ground, be part of the solution. Not discussion that goes on in an office or goes on a big table. It needs to be the people that it affects. So if you're trying to solve transportation problems, you need to have people within the communities, people that are on the district councils, whatever it might be. If you're trying to solve education problems, you need to have the people that's involved and knows what works and what doesn't work. And that's a variety of people. That can be teachers, educators, business people, superintendents, those type of people. So if you want to solve problems, that's where you need to have subcommittees to take care of that. We have to increase our revenue stream somehow. And I truly believe, and I think you're going to see something in this next session, I truly believe that if we reevaluate a lot of these revenue streams that we have, and we reformulate some of the formulas that are there, that we can increase the base without having to increase any taxes, but it would just be a little bit on the bottom end, increase our base and develop quite a bit more money. There's a lot of different ways to do it. There's a lot of discussion on it, but you can't do anything without the money. So you've got to develop revenue streams. And the economy is one of the ways to do it, but I think updating and upgrading our tax formulas is another.
Thank you. Now to our second question from Mrs. Matthews, government class at Empire High School. As a future voter, I deeply care about the employment rate in Arizona peaking out early compared to other states. What do you believe our state government should do to help the economy of Arizona surpass other Western states? We're going to start with Mike Holmes, and then we're going to go to Jason Lindstrom, Gail Griffin, Jaime Alvarez, Drew John, and Dennis Barger.
You know, it's funny. If you read the newspapers, you'll see in the very same newspaper two different headlines often. One, how great Arizona is doing in the economy, and then two, that this is the third straight month in a row that jobs have been lost in Graham and Greenlee counties. You know, we see our government, we see our governor talk about economic growth in glowing terms, and it's all about Maricopa. It's not about out here. It's not about out in the spaces in between where people actually live and work. All of the focus on job growth and economic development happens in the big places and not the little ones. We pay the same taxes, don't we? So, what do I think? Well, first off, you have to have a plan, regional planning, like the Douglas Port of Entry corridor would be a great start for us here. But it needs to be around the entire state because you can't just focus on one area. And we need to get our tax-supported institutions like the Arizona Commerce Authority to pick up their nose and get outside of Phoenix and come out here to places where it really matters and where people are suffering and focus on these types of areas. And let's look at tourism, because the governor has cut the budget for tourism two years in a row. And yet tourism is one of the fastest ways to get new inflows of really free money, if you think about it. In the Tucson area, we get $1 billion of economic impact money, basically $1 billion of spending from Mexican tourism alone. And there's so many other great places out there that could be benefiting from that as well. So, let's focus our institutions out here where we need it and get them out of Phoenix and get them out here where we need the jobs and the growth.
Unfortunately for rural southern Arizona, we've kind of set ourselves up to be in a situation where we are highly dependent on federal dollars coming, to pay for Border Patrol, Customs. I mean, in my hometown in Bisbee, Arizona, when I drive to court in Douglas, for every ordinary car I pass, I probably pass 2 or 3 government cars. Now, what does that mean? It means that at any point in time when the federal government decides to cut some project in southern Arizona, everything around it dries up. Property values go down. They put a little more money in, property values go up. We're very dependent on that cycle. Just like I had said earlier, when it comes to education, we need to think about how we use our public money, because the money is here. We are not an impoverished state. It's here. We need to use it in a way where when we invest $1, it's going to pay us back $2 later on. Education is one of the ways we can do that, but another way we can do that is by investing in things like infrastructure. We can't have an industry down here if they don't have the right roads to drive their trucks on. I love Mike's idea about investing in the port down in Douglas. I think it would help the whole southern part of the state. There's a lot of good ideas out there, but we're not choosing the ones that are going to pay us back later on. We're throwing, good money into bad causes, putting it in the pockets of cronies that are part of the establishment. Thank you.
At the state, when we do our budget, we do a 3-year budget so we can see, looking out, if there's any problems. The average increase that we're seeing now, we're holding our own and we're no longer digging a hole. We're increasing revenues by approximately 3%, 3.2%. How do we attract more businesses so that we can get more revenue is the secret. Commerce Authority has set up offices in California so that when California industries leave on their way to Texas, they stop in Arizona and they locate here. High dollar technology firms were ideal for that. Cochise County and Fort Huachuca has lost population as Greenlee has as well. Douglas Port of Entry, we've been working on that for 20 years. They pulled out the rails, and once you pull out the rails, it's hard to find funds to put them back, but that is a solution for southern Arizona that would benefit all of us, going from the border through 191 or thereabouts, and go from to Benson and other places as well. In economic development and stability of our local communities, not just Tucson and Phoenix, we need rural development and protection of our agriculture and ranching and natural resource industries as well.
I certainly agree that things are pretty bleak, especially for our teachers. And until we start getting the respect for our teachers that engineers have, it's going to continue. And I think that that's one of the cultural changes we can make within our own state. With regards to economic development, you know, one of the things that we can do is have the universities and colleges working together on biotech industries, and we can then recapitalize the investment tax credits for those kinds of businesses. Currently down in Sierra Vista, Cochise College has a program to help with cybersecurity, so they've now got that as one of their academic courses down there that you can work on. Getting the University of Arizona to go down there and help with getting more bachelor degrees, that helps. And so all of that will come together. My son, my youngest son, when he moved to this state, he had been teaching elsewhere. And when he moved to Arizona to be close to his family, as a teacher, he took a $13,000 a year pay cut. What does that say?
Sadly, yes.
My turn? You read the question again for me? Sure. Please.
As a future voter, I deeply care about the employment rate in Arizona peaking out early compared to other states. What do you believe our state government should do to help the economy of Arizona surpass other Western states?
Well, we have to have their infrastructure in place. I've spoke to the ADOT board, Arizona Department of Transportation board many times, and you talk to the voting population of Maricopa County and the giant population they have, and they say, well, our roads are fine. Well, I go to the ADOT board and I said, unless you start figuring out a way to get some money to the smaller rural Arizona, you people are going to be driving around in circles, because there's no way to get out of your area without our roads. Houghton Road is disgraceful when you drive down it. Some of the other roads, you know, you think you got a broken axle half the time. So we have to do something in our infrastructure. Part of our infrastructure will turn around and will help our economy, because if you have a company that's bringing in maybe a glass company, they're not going to come here because they can't even travel out on the roads. We've got to develop our infrastructure, but infrastructure includes everything. It doesn't just include just roads, it includes the schools, it includes the community, the drainage, it includes all of that. So we have to put money into our infrastructure to help develop the economy. You know, my brother and I had a big grocery store, and there was always tax cuts for everybody to come into the valley. He's tried to expand for years. They don't help the local businesses. Local businesses need to have that access to that capital to be able to increase their revenues and expand and grow their employees and grow their business, instead of just worrying about strictly just bringing industry in. We've got a lot of good businesses here that can expand.
I think the first thing we absolutely need to do is protect the two bases in southern Arizona. We have to protect Davis-Monthan and Fort Huachuca, because without those two bases, Sierra Vista and Hereford and Huachuca City would look very, very different. A lot of people, like Mike himself, moved here in the Vail area and commuted to Fort Huachuca. DM certainly has a major impact on what happens in Tucson. So the first thing we need to do is protect what we already have. The second thing we need to do is realize that the rural communities, as you get past Vail and head out into Cochise County or Greenlee or Graham counties, a lot of times their young people are leaving to come into the universities, whether it be ASU, NAU, or the U of A, and then they're staying in those cities and they're not taking their talents back to the rural communities. And that's hurting the rural communities because they're losing their best and brightest, and so that drives up their unemployment, and so people begin to live. Gail said that Cochise and Graham counties are seeing a reduction in population. That is rare in the United States. It is happening here because we have not invested in the rural parts of our state, and we certainly need to do that. It's probably, it's related to that instant gratification piece of we want it and we want it now. Gail said we plan for a 2-year budget cycle. Well, we need to be planning for a 20-year process. We need to be looking long term, and that takes resolve and it takes telling people you can't have what you want now because we have to invest, and over the next 15, 20 years, you're going to see an improvement. And we live in a society that doesn't value long-term planning as much as getting the Snicker bar right now as you're checking out at the store.
Thank you. We'll now move to our first question from the audience for all the general candidates. We will be sticking with the 90 seconds response. If cuts in the budget are required to increase money to schools, where would your cuts be? For example, programs. We're going to start with Jason Lindstrom, then move to Gail Griffin, Jaime Alvarez, Drew John, Dennis Barger, and then Mike Holmes.
It's a good question. I'll openly admit I don't know right off the bat where those cuts would come from. I do know that there's some things that we've spent money on for a long time that need to be reconsidered. For example, the number of prisons we build to house nonviolent offenders. I mean, I know, because I work in the criminal justice system, that it costs us as taxpayers about $40,000 per inmate per year. I know we can spend our money better than that, okay? I know I've also probably been a little passionate up here, maybe exhibited some anger, and that's how I feel. I feel like we have not done a good job, and I haven't worked in the Capitol building. So my intent would be to go in and turn that light on and figure out why it is that we don't have more from the money that we send up to our state. I think we need to turn the light on, look at it carefully, and then make those tough decisions as we would in our own households. We have priorities. Some things are more important than other things. I guarantee you I can find some places to cut our budget. I know they're there. But I won't claim at this point in time to be able to specifically tell you what that is. Only one person in here is experienced in that way and might offer some real answer to that. I don't know. Thank you.
Talking about me. and we, every year when we do the budget, we look at what we don't need. We look at what is working and what isn't working and how we can make things work better. We're looking at consolidation. Comment has been made on private prison, and I just want to make one comment on private prisons, whether you're supportive or not, but when we build prisons, the private prison builds them, and after 10 years they turn them over to the state, so that saves you money from building prisons. And I know the argument, if we built more schools, then we wouldn't have to build so many prisons. So, but looking at what works and what doesn't work, and that discussion goes on every year at budget time. It takes 16 senators and 31 House members and one governor to agree on the budget, and that's probably why it takes this it takes us 70, 80 days in order to work on the budget and come up with what's an agreement and everybody's wants and needs and where the funds should go. So it's a challenge every year to make sure that we have a structurally balanced budget and we don't overspend and we put the money where it needs to go.
Well, I said earlier that I thought that we needed to recapitalize in the investment tax credits for biotechnology industries. That will help immensely here. You know, one of the things that Mike and I have traveled together at different locations, he talks a lot about the Douglas Port of Entry. We were at one meeting one time, and everybody was excited, and they're talking about, this is what I'm going to, this is what we need in order to get the Port of Entry going. And it was one person after another, and it included many people from throughout the district. There was a person there from ADOT that was taking down everything on the dream and writing it down on the dream sheet. Finally, I asked, okay, you hear what the challenges are. How do we overcome that? He said, you need advocacy at the State House. Yet, when we spoke with the mayor and council members, they hadn't gotten any kind of advocacy from any of the three representatives. That is key to economic development if you go on ahead and support your constituents on economic projects that they have, it will occur.
Yes,
As far as cutting in one department or another, I'm not going to say which one that would be, but I will say that in Graham County, where I've been spending a lot of my time with as a county supervisor, we've lost over $10 million since this thing started. $5 million of it was actual cuts, or it was actually mandates that the counties had to start paying, where the state had been paying it before. Plus, we lost another $5 million in revenue streams. So it's been very difficult for us to do it. So as far as where I would cut, I don't think that's, at this point, I could say that. But I can say one thing, that I'll find places to cut, because if you don't have, I'm a firm believer, if you don't have the money, don't spend it. So if you don't have the money to do your budget, then you're going to have to cut your budget wherever it might be. That's as simple as that. We have to do it in businesses. But as a business person, too many times you worry about cutting expenses instead of building sales. You know, you'll see a business that's struggling, and they're sitting there cutting their labor, cutting this expense, cutting that expense, and pretty quick they've cut themselves out of business. You've got to build sales. We have got to figure out a way to build sales. That's developing the economy, that's increasing our tax base somehow, and getting things going that way. So I wouldn't, there's gonna be places to cut, but as a business person, we've got to figure out ways to build the dollars, build the sales, and that's through the economy.
So the first thing I would do is look at where are we duplicating efforts? Where are we paying multiple organizations to do the same thing with federal or state dollars? In our case, we're talking mostly state. But where are we as a state piling money on top of what the federal government might already be doing? I'll give you an example. Arizona, our governor just created a border task force, right? Well, we have 4 sheriff's departments that deal with the border. Why not give them more money? Why create another layer of bureaucracy, another group of people that have to now interact and create more work, rather than giving the people who are doing the job and have been doing the job for 100 years additional resources? Why does that have to happen? Why were they not considered in part of that process? That's an example. I think we have to look at our healthcare costs. We certainly have to keep those down. We have a ton of fraud in our state and in some of our social services. You know, how about proposing a law that says if you want an unemployment check, you have to work 16 hours a week to serve the community? I bet you a lot of people would find a job if they actually had to do something to get money. It's not that far-fetched a concept. Contribute to your society, or don't get the money. Why don't we make it so that there's a partnership here? I bet you we would employ more people. And so we just have to look at where private dollars and where public dollars end up in private hands. We've heard that from a number of people tonight. We have to do a better job of keeping an eye on that as well.
We spend 3 times more to keep a convict in prison each year than we do on our kids in schools. We've cut the budgets on schools. We're 50th. We've cut our Department of Child Safety down to almost nothing, huge backlogs. And all we're doing when we do that is create more criminals. I mean, there's a direct link between children graduating from school and not going to prison, or I should say, flunking out of schools and going to prison. 1/3 of our high schoolers don't graduate from high school. So, it's pretty clear to me we can either spend money on prisons, and we've got one of the largest prison populations in the nation, or we can spend money on schools. Which is more cost effective? Clearly to me, spending money on schools. Where do we get that money? Because that's always the question. Well, right now we're about, I think, $220 million budget surplus that was not accounted for in the budget that we could be spending on schools. We had additional monies last year if we used the budget surplus from last year as well as the rainy day fund, we'd had about $1 billion that we could put into education. There are any number of things that we can do to make this right. We just need the guts to do it. And you need to elect the people that have the guts to make that happen.
Thank you. Our second question from the general audience to all the candidates is, in the last legislative session, funds were directed to a state border task force. How do you feel about state funds being used for federal immigration issues? We're going to start, we're going to start with Gail Griffin, Jaime Alvarez, Drew John, Dennis Barger, Mike Holmes, and Jason Lundstrom.
The Border Task Force was needed. It's working hand in hand with the local sheriffs, border sheriffs. There's going to be funding or assistance in funding 5 additional officers for, I know, Cochise County. The border is not secure regardless of what the federal government says. If you live on the border, the ranchers that are on the border live in fear every day. People in the cities along the border, maybe not so much. They don't see it like everyone else does. The drug cartels are actually working on American soil along the American border. And it is a dangerous place for those that husband and wife cannot go to a movie or go shopping together. Somebody has to stay home or their property will be broken into. And so unless you talk to the actual people that live on the border, particularly the ranchers that live day in and day out with a particular situation, I've spent days with them. I would invite anybody, I would invite the candidates on this stage to have a border tour and talk to the local sheriffs and have them tell you about the drugs that are coming in and ruining our children, and what comes in through our border ends up in your community and other communities, not only in the state of Arizona, but in the country. It is a huge problem, and it needs to be fixed, and the Border Task Force works hand in hand with the local sheriffs. Thank you.
I'd like to go back to the previous question before I answer this one, because I got a little ahead of myself. I was explaining to you about how helping develop the economy. What I failed to tell you is that I had already mentioned about the tax credit cuts for the private tuition, because that's way too high, okay? So I wanted to make sure I could close the loop there. As far as the federal and state, I do not agree with what they're doing, okay? You've got, in our own county down there in Cochise, we've got over-aggressive county attorney who is going after, cases that belong in the federal jurisdiction. There's a difference between state and federal. And when you don't have that, it ends up costing you more money in your county because you are now using your county funds to try and address a federal issue. And I think that you've got to keep yourself, reminding yourself, if you don't believe that there is a separation there. When you're talking about illegal immigration, that's federal. So state, stay out of it.
The Border Task Force, that's a federal issue, but when it affects our people, we have to step up and do something about it. You talk to the ranchers down there in the Douglas area and the ranchers that are on the border, they're struggling just to make a living down there. And some of that state land that we receive income that helps our schools. Those guys down there, after talking to quite a few of them and having some relatives that way too, their cost of doing business has risen almost 50%. And the cattle market is way, way down there right now. They have to pay higher automobile insurance because they're getting stolen by cartel people, so they're at high risk. They're having to pay higher on their home insurance, their property insurance, their ranch insurance, their cattle insurance. Everything is so high, they're having to spend on them. Now, the governor's stepping up, and I'm pretty sure the governor's going to go after some federal funds to help fund this thing. But Dennis made a comment that was brought up about 10 years ago with the County Supervisors Association that I belong to as a board member. And one of those was to take some of this money and give it to the Sheriff's Department. Not just for Border Task Force, but also some of the DPS money that's been funneled off of the highway user revenue dollars every year, including this year, that would go to the Sheriff's Department, and they could start doing their job. There's sometimes in our county we hardly have any deputies on duty.
I paid my taxes last year, and what became pretty clear to me is that a lot more of my money is going to the federal government than it's going to our state here. As the government class in the back knows, there's different layers of government, and we all have different responsibilities, things we're supposed to do. For us to use our state money to start concentrating on things like immigration reform is absurd, okay? We pay for that already. If you're unhappy with what's happening on the border, there's a way to deal with it, okay? Martha McSally, I think, is the representative in this area, but there are some federal representatives that you need to talk to. You need to have some serious time, face time with them. That said, I grew up right on the border. My mom owns a house, her land is right on the border. And I have to tell you, my experience through my entire life and her experience is completely different from the things you might hear from the mainstream media. My mother doesn't walk the door to her house. Her nearest neighbor's a quarter-mile away. The only experience that she's had with illegal immigration has been people that are thirsty and lost and asking her to call the Border Patrol because they think they're in Louisiana, okay? These stories you hear may not be so true, okay? The guy with 18,000 acres on the border with his cattle ranch may not be telling you the same story as someone like my mother. Thank you.
And we'll go ahead and go.
So I think the issue is we have to address the fact that there's the ideal situation and then there's the reality of the situation. The reality is that this is a federal responsibility. It's outlined in the Constitution. The problem is with the reality, the secondary part of that is that they're not protecting our border. So we have to lobby them to do their job. We have to make noise. We have to be the squeaky wheel. So that's one of the things that we would do, making sure that not only does Martha McSally come down and see the border on her side, or Raul Grijalva, but our state senators as well, and then some other influential people when they visit Arizona need to see what we're dealing with. I don't think, ideally, we should be using state dollars to do the federal government's responsibility, but we do need to protect our citizens and we do need to protect our land. I've had the chance while we've been doing this campaign to speak with some ranchers, and they do have a different version than Jason's mom does, and primarily that drug trafficking area has moved over towards the Douglas area, significantly further away from Bisbee. And I've talked to Border Patrol agents, I've talked to the Sheriff's Department down in Cochise County, and the stories are real, and those are real live people. We need to protect them. I think up here in the Vail area, we are far removed from that, so we don't understand it. But ideally, going back to where that money is, I would have put that money in the hands of the Sheriff's Department, who are already familiar with the area.
I've seen a lot of borders in my life. I grew up second half of my childhood in Harlingen, Texas, and that is right on the border. I chose to live here largely because it was right on the border. And I spent a lot of time defending borders, whether that was Afghanistan, Iraq, or Kosovo. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you think you're going to defend the line by putting people on the line and not have something backing them up, you're wrong. It doesn't work that way. The only defense that works is a defense in depth. And the way you do a defense in depth in a civil society like ours is you enable the local law enforcement to do their jobs. Now, Governor Ducey, when he created this border tax force of $55 million, he did that largely by taking the money from the local sheriff's departments. Sheriff Donos here in Pima County thinks it's a stupid idea and was very outspoken against it. Sheriff Daniels acceded to it, but he also thought it was a dumb idea and would rather have had that money in it for his officers to do their jobs in community policing. And oh, by the way, the DPS, prior to this bright idea, was only working 2 shifts a day. Did you know that? from 10 to 6 in the morning. We had no DPS troopers on the highways. So, you know, for the party that's supposed to be for smaller government, coming with a big government solution like this border task force, doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's put that money into our local sheriff's departments and our local police departments and let them do their jobs.
Thank you. I'm going to let our timekeepers change to 60 seconds now. We're going to move to a kind of a lightning round. So I know, take off your jackets, huh? Okay, so with these questions are normally directed towards specific candidates, but this question is for each candidate. So this is going to be a 1-minute response. We're kind of late in the evening, so let's just simplify things. We're going to go straight down. We're going to start with Mr. Alvarez, and we're going to go straight down the line to answer, and then go back to Gail Griffins. So this is a 1-minute response. The question is, what will you do to get the dark money out of the legislature? Mr. Alvarez.
Well, you know, one of the things that I was already doing when that first came out was I was out walking as I was canvassing and knocking on doors, and I was having a petition signed. Needless to say, I was a little discouraged that we weren't successful in that effort, but I will do everything I can to get rid of that, because unlike my opponent, I am not going to have PACs funding my campaign. And later on, when dark money kicks in next month, okay, when you don't know who they are and how much they're contributing, I think that's bad. So I will do everything within my power to reverse dark money.
So I too am not a real big fan of dark money, the concept. I think we need to clarify, because I am running a traditional race and I can take PAC money, but I have to declare where that money came from, and I am limited to the amount of dollars I can receive. So I can't take $1 million check, but if you know someone who wants to write me $1 million check, see me afterwards. So there are limits. In Arizona, you can only take $5,000 from any PAC or any individual if you are running. So I don't think that's the kind of dark money we're talking about here. I think we're talking about the statewide elections and some of the congressional elections. So anyone up here, and I know some of us ran clean elections, some of us ran traditional, but even those of us that do traditional, we're limited to $5,000. So I don't think that's the kind of issue we're talking about. We're talking about the state issues like governor and U.S. And so we can do something, and I think we should do something to limit that, because I don't think billionaires should be able to buy the governor's office in the state of Arizona.
And one of y'all walked up to me today. Oh, is it my turn? Yes. Okay, good. Then I am right. Good. All right. One of y'all walked up to me today and handed me a $100 bill and said, "Here's for your campaign." I couldn't take it. I am finished with fundraising. I am done. I have collected over $305 individual donations from people in this district. I had a smaller account that I could raise no more than $160 from any individual, period, and nothing from businesses, nothing from corporations. That's how the clean election systems work. And if I follow those rules, then guess what? Here in a week or so, I'm going to get a check for $40,000 to run my campaign. And that's raised not from taxes, that's raised from court fees and fines. So what would I do? I'd mandate that every single politician in this state participate in clean elections, not take outside money, period. And if we had to figure out other sources of income to make that happen, I would make that happen.
I'm not going to argue whether clean elections or traditional. I'm traditional. I'm not going to argue which one's best. Dark money can happen in both clean elections, and can happen in traditional, because they can do it through independent expenditures. But I will tell you that, like Dennis said, every dollar we get, one cannot come from a business in traditional, and the other can't come from a corporation. It has to come from individuals, and it's all posted right on the website. It tells exactly where it came from. And so I've worked hard all my life to develop economy in my area and help their businesses grow and everything. So me going to them and asking them to help get me elected has worked for me, because I earned it. It wasn't just a handout. I worked for them people. I worked for all of them. So I'm not going to sit here and argue about that, which is better than the other. Dark money's wrong. It needs to be reported and there needs to be transparency. It's as simple as that. Don't try to call it clean elections versus traditional.
I agree with Mike. I think everyone should run clean elections purely. Take the money out of the system. Once you start adding a profit motive, to these public things that we have, it totally corrupts them. My number one word for my campaign is transparency. I don't know if you got the impression from me yet, but I believe that our money is being squandered in a way that most of us don't even fully understand. I think that we need to do everything within our power to make sure that all of us at any time can find out what exactly is happening with our money, and none of it should be hidden. I did want to go back just momentarily to the border issue, and I apologize, I know there's not much time, but whenever you make a weed that should be worth 10 cents, worth hundreds of dollars, it's the same kind of corruption. You should expect that you're going to create a huge criminal base. Well, whenever you make public things valuable, the same thing is going to happen.
I, too, am running traditional. I think we have the freedom to spend our own money if we so desire, and not have to be mandated into clean election. I'm opposed to clean elections, and that's spending monies that should go someplace else. Disclosure, every nickel that's contributed to my campaign can be found on the Secretary of State's page, and it's transparent. And when you take a dollar, you should be able to tell people where that dollar came from. Since I have a few extra seconds, I'll go back to the last question on the border. When the federal government fails in their responsibility to protect the citizens that live on the border and live in the state, then it does become a state issue. You can tell that to the Krentz family, that their father and husband was murdered by illegals on their ranch. I know the Krentz family quite well, and they live in fear every day. But they took the breadwinner out of that rancher's family. And so when the federal government fails in doing what they're supposed to do, then it does become a state issue.
Thank you. Our next question is for Drew John. If elected, will you support or oppose expanding tax credits and vouchers or ESAs that funnel tax dollars to private schools?
I've tried to figure that one out, and I have mixed emotions on both ways. I believe in the concept of it. Like I said earlier, my biggest concern is what will happen with the public schools that are out there that doesn't have the choices. That's my biggest concern. If you have a town that has a Walmart come in and all of a sudden all the businesses are shut down and the Walmart decides to leave, who's going to take care of the town? And I just worry that we get all this money going to all the charter schools, and then we turn around and we have charter schools and no public schools, and then all of a sudden, like Mike mentioned, that there are profit centers for some people. We all know that. If you don't, you have to read a little bit about it. And what happens if those guys decide they're not making money anymore and they pull out? That's where the district charter schools comes in, because it's protected as a public school.
Our next question is for Mike Holmes. As a student interested in enlisting in the U.S. Army and also in NJROTC, how would you handle the budget for CTE programs like Vail's NJROTC? Also, what was your, I'm going to say MOS, is that how in the U.S. Army?
Let me start with the easy one first. I had a 30-year career in the Army. For the first 15 years, I was an infantry officer. And in the second half, I rented it out as an intelligence officer because I found out that it's hard on the knees to be a grunt. CTEs, people don't really understand, I think, how important CTEs are, continuing technical education. My stance on that is that absolutely needs to be funded, and it needs to be funded hard, because we have fantastic universities in this state that make the dreamers and the designers and the people who come up with the ideas. But we have done a terrible job of making the people, of educating the people who are actually going to put those things together. We need people who can bend metal and put things together and make stuff. Because without that, those dreamers and designers, they're going to go somewhere else where they can find that labor that can make the things that they come up with. So whether it's NJROTC or whether it's learning how to be a pipe fitter or anything in between, that absolutely needs to be funded, and it needs to be funded at not only just appropriate levels, but we need to invest in it so that we can get the economic development we want.
Thank you. This question is for Dennis Barger. The legislature has been cutting taxes instead of funding schools adequately. Why not roll back the tax cuts?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Legislature has been cutting taxes instead of funding schools adequately. Why not roll back the tax cuts? I think they're asking to take away those tax cuts.
So I'll answer the question the way I think it's intended, and that is, why are we issuing tax cuts when we could be saving that money and putting it into education? I wouldn't vote for any more tax cuts, actually, at the corporate level. Mike gave the proposition number, I don't remember what it is, but in Arizona, in order to increase taxes as a state, you need a 2/3 vote. It's going to be really hard to get 2/3 of our legislature to say, yep, we're going to raise taxes. So we've been talking about creating additional revenue streams. It only takes a simple majority to cut taxes. So what has happened since that proposition passed is legislatures have sequentially over time knocked off some of those taxes. So we have more people to provide services to and lower tax rates. And that's why we're where we are. Quite honestly, we need to make sure that any surplus we have goes into investing in the future. And we've heard all night long that education is the way to do that. So I wouldn't approve any more tax cuts.
Thank you. This question is for Jason Lindstrom. What are some ways the state can encourage renewable energy, or do you think the state should be involved at all?
Well, I think one thing that we have here in Arizona is a lot of sunshine. I do know that our state monopoly, APS, has done whatever they can do to try to protect their monopoly and their interests, and I don't think it's necessarily helped, our economy or industry in terms of creating green energy, things of that nature. I do think that, solar energy is going to be a big part of our future, and the government could be a part, of that industry and maybe creating some incentives to make that happen. I know that the courthouse that I work in, what they did is they put the solar panels right over their parking lot. I thought it was a great idea. I hope that they actually are going to benefit from that long term. I have a feeling APS probably did something that's going to benefit their interests rather than the interests of the community in Douglas that has those panels there. But yeah, definitely it's something I would support.
Thank you. Our next question is for Jaime Alvarez. It's a student question. It says, how do you feel about cutting funding for entitlement programs to better fund education?
I didn't hear the one part.
I'm sorry, you want me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
How do you feel about cutting funding for entitlement programs to better fund education?
Well, that's what I've been saying. I think that, the way that the student tuition organizations are set up, they were set up like that to make it legal. Because our Constitution says that you cannot you cannot mix. You've got the separation of church and state, basically. And what has happened is that they did away with that by establishing the student tuition organizations. And so we've got a senator who is, he has one of these student tuition organizations. He gets 10% of the revenue that comes from the state. And I think that's wrong. And so I believe that the private tuitions need to be cut. And I think we can start up very, very easily with $10 million a year and see what happens. Continue to reduce it. Time's over.
Thank you. This question, last question, is for Gail Griffin. It's a two-part question. Why have you supported budgets that cut K-12 public school funding? And do you support privatization of schools? Why or why not?
Well, basically, it's balancing the budget, and when we were at $3 billion in debt, the economy fell apart, and had to prioritize. We cut education less than any other industry or agency or department. Some of the agencies and departments were cut 10 to 15% across the board. when there's $3 billion in the hole and we have $1 billion in debt still in Arizona. Again, on the yellow sheet that you're going to pick up, it has the table per pupil funding for the last 7 years, and for the last 6 years, funds per student when you combine state, local, and federal have all increased. So please pick that up, and I'd be happy to stick around afterwards and answer what was the second half, and I think my minute is up. But what was the second half? If I could answer that, I'd be happy to do that.
Maybe afterwards you can meet with people.
Okay.
The second half, I was actually doing my little thing here, so I'm just going to read the whole thing. So why have you supported budgets that cut K-12 public education funding, and then do you support privatization of schools? Why or why not? So maybe afterwards you can talk with people. Okay, so I think we have just a little bit. Okay. Closing? Okay, so we're going to actually end the questions. We're going to give each candidate an opportunity to give us a 2-minute closing statement. And thanks again for coming. Oh, sorry. Why don't we go ahead and start with Dennis Barger, and we'll just go down the row.
2 minutes?
2 minutes, yes.
Well, I think that Arizona needs some help. I think that Arizona is a great place to live. My wife Cindy and I have raised our children in this community here in Vail. We've been very pleased to do so. But I'm a little frightened for what's going to happen when they get out of college. Are they going to want to stay in Arizona? Are they going to go somewhere else? What is Arizona going to provide for them? And I think we can turn things around in Arizona. I think we need some people who, day in, day out, have shown leadership, who have the ability to problem solve, to listen to people from both sides of the aisle. If you heard my answers tonight, I'm clearly not a far-right Republican. I am more moderate, I understand that. But my job day in, day out is listening to people. And that is what I do. I have to solve problems, I have to make informed decisions. I'm hoping that independents show up and vote in this election. There are 4 of us on the Republican ticket. Only 2 of us will go on to the November election to face Mike and Jason. So Drew and I are 2 of your choices, and the other 2 are not here tonight. We are basically trying to make sure that everyone hears what we have to say. This is, in my mind, I said earlier in the evening, kind of an interview process. At least I hope I said that earlier this evening. I've said a lot of things over the last few nights. But as we go through this process, really, this is an interview. I mean, this is a job. We're looking to get hired. You are the selection committee. We're coming in, we're sitting in front of you, you're asking the questions, we're answering, and ultimately you're going to pick someone to represent you and sit in the state legislature. And hopefully you want someone who listens and problem solves and has leadership experience. And that is what I bring to the table. I've done it very well, I believe, in a very good school district over the last 20 years, and I'm currently the Arizona High School Principal of the Year. I've been recognized statewide, so I think I bring leadership to the table. Thank you.
So before I decided to engage in politics, and I was out there in the crowd with you and listening to politicians, I did a pretty good job, I think, of listening to the candidate and voting based on their qualifications and not on the party. And I tried to do that all my life. My grandfather instilled that in me, my father instilled that in me, and so for me, party was just a part of the entire complexion of the person for whom I decided to vote. I'm going to challenge you all out there to have that same sort of point of view, because the reality is in this state that most of us don't vote that way. We look down the ticket, we look for the R or the D, and we're never going to get ahead. And it's made people so angry that you can see the results because of the fact that the independents are the largest group of voters in this state and growing, because they're so disaffected and so unhappy with the way the parties have performed. And all you have to do is remember just the past couple of weeks on TV, and you can see why. So, I said it before, let's start voting with our heads and stop voting with our hearts. And let's start listening to what people like us on the stage have to say. And think. Seriously think. Thank you.
You know, I got into politics, and I look at it a little bit different. There's good politicians, and there's bad politicians. But those people were probably bad in the first place. So you have to look at the character of the people. Politics is an action. It's taking different ideas and coming up with a solution. That's what politics does. That's what the job is. So character is very, very important. Background is important. The experience is important for that. And, you know, my priorities are what your priorities are. As Dennis says, I work for everybody in Vail, Sierra Vista, Elfrida, Pierce. And what I plan to do is I plan to set up forums in these communities and actually hopefully be able to get away Thursday night or Friday and be able to come and come to these forums once in a while and talk to people and find out, because priorities are going to change. I don't know that education is going to change till we get this thing fixed. It's going to be a while on infrastructure, but priorities are going to change in the communities. It's going to be important to communicate. That's one thing. This will be my 7th election that I've been involved in. And I don't say that to brag, but I say that because my peers elected me. People in my community, my neighbors, my friends, because they know me. I know you don't know me that well. You can actually call people in Sanford if you want. You can call people in Greenlee County if you want and talk to them and talk about character. Because that's what it takes to go to the state capitol. To know when you got to stand up for your strong morals and your strong values, stand up for your citizens, and be willing to fight. I've done that as a county supervisor for 16 years. I did it on the school board also. I look forward to representing this whole district. It's pretty neat to be able to represent the people that you were raised with, that you grew up with. It's a big opportunity for me, and I'm excited about it, and I appreciate your support in the election. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
As maybe some people up here would agree, being up here is a sacrifice. I'm not retired. I'm not bored. I'm not even an overly social person. At home, I'm an introvert. I came straight here from work, and in the evenings, I'm going to be teaching a class, U of A. I'm married. My wife's at home. My wife for 20 years. I have 2 kids in high school. They ate dinner without me. I'm here because I believe in this. I feel like something is wrong. And because I feel so passionately about it, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. And I'm not here to apply for a job. I feel like it's more like jury duty. Okay, there's no money at the end of this train for any of us here. Okay, it's like jury duty. I'm laying myself out there for you. I'm going to be as honest and open with you as I can be. I'm going to tell it like it is. I'm not going to hide anything. I'm not going to pander for your vote. I believe I'm the most qualified to stand up to some of these special interests and lobbyists that have been there forever. I've worked in the criminal justice system for most of my adult career. I'm not looking for any favors from any wealthy people. I'm not looking for a path to some greater political position. I have one purpose. I want to turn that light on in a dark room. Okay? I want to light it up, not just for me, for my own curiosities, but for my family and my friends and all the intelligent, educated people that I interact with every day that are so put off by politics that they've given up. I'm here to hopefully inspire them to say, look, we don't have to give up. We actually can fix this. We can stop the train. And I'll stand in front of it. I'm going to stand in front of this train and show you that we can stop it. But I can't do it myself. My name is Jason Lindstrom. I hope you remember me when it's time to vote. Thank you.
I want to thank you all for being here. It's been an honor to represent you in the last 5.5 years and finishing up my 6th year in the State Senate. I will continue to work hard for rural Arizona and Legislative District 14. Some of the endorsements that I've received is from the small business community, Chamber of Commerce's Professional Firefighters of Arizona, Arizona's Medical Association, and Arizona Fraternal Order of Police, which is the largest police organization in Arizona and the nation. Some of the awards that I've been honored with has been Senator of the Year from Small Business, Legislator of the Year from the Rural Health Association, Legislator legislative champion from the Arizona chapter of the March of Dimes. I've been given the award of Champion of the Taxpayer, Friend of the Family, Leader of the Year from Capital Times for Public Policy, and also Hero of Arizona Cities and Towns in former years. I believe in less government, lower taxes, personal responsibility, and the free enterprise system. The free enterprise system works. When you attract more business, you create more revenue. When you create more revenue, then it can go to the needs of the state of Arizona, to include education and the other issues that are very important. My name is Gail Griffin. I appreciate you being here. I ask for your vote on August 30th and in November as well. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to stick around afterwards and answer any questions you have. And if you want to come to the Capitol, I'll be happy to, you can shadow me up there anytime that you'd like. Thank you.
Well, what I'd like to say is that, you know, there's a lot of candidates up here running for office, and they all came up here with a passion for one idea or another. But the underlying cause for that is that I believe every one of them feels that this state legislature is out of focus, and that the legislation and the policies and practices are failing. And so everybody wants the change. I'm a retired auditor, okay? So when you hear me talking about these different issues, I get into the details, I get into the weeds. I was a one-issue candidate, education. And since then, I've had to get in and look at water. I have to look at the economy. I have to look at healthcare, because those three issues were brought to my attention by the constituents. And so I continue going out there learning, because as an auditor, you get to the root of the problem. And when you find it, you come up with the solutions. Now, you don't do that by yourself. You have subject matter experts that you go to. And that's what I will take to the Senate. And my values were instilled in me when I was a young child. And then when I went into the Marine Corps, I got those values instilled also. I worked for the Army for many years, and I always knew the soldier in the foxhole was my customer. I look at every constituent as that soldier. Thank you for being here, and I hope I can count on your support and your vote August and November.
Yes, please give our Vail Parent Network would just like to thank our candidates for coming out tonight. Some of them had to drive quite a ways to be here with us in Vail, and so we appreciate their time and efforts to come visit with us and talk about why they want to represent us in District 14. We also want to thank Allison for taking time out tonight to be our moderator. We appreciate her service to our Vail community, so give her a round of applause. I just want to remind you again the importance of voting. Often elections like these are won in the primaries, and so the primary election on August 30th is really important. So get out there and vote. Voting is a privilege, and so we need to take that serious, because it can make or break elections like this. So Vail Parent Network, if you guys aren't familiar with us, we would love to tell you guys more about us out in the foyer. Please stay and visit with the candidates and enjoy some refreshments on us, and thank you all for coming tonight.